Well, hey, friends. It is TexAgs Rewind presented by T-Mobile. I like T-Mobile. In fact, I got a T-Mobile phone right here, a little iPhone from T-Mobile. I'm going to call my next guest on this, and I'm just going to do it from the phone. But today's show, we went through A&M's opponents and kind of ranked them 1 through 12. OB was a part of that conversation. A lot of you listening to the show right now, type in, who do you think's the number one? No, don't do number one. Give me like the bulk of it. Like, give me all 12. Write it down when you comment on this. Who you think the number one team is, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down. That'd be fun. All right, so we did that. We had Crissy Froyd on, who's a Mississippi State insider, and she thinks that Mississippi State's going to be pretty darn good. Maybe a 9-win team. We'll see about that. Jason Howell joined us, Recruiting Country, the pool party. That's me jumping into the pool. We talked about the pool party and how great it's going to be this weekend and how the momentum train is going to start picking right back up. And then we had Jim Weber from Lost Letterman back in the day. We know Jim. He gave us some thoughts and on all things happening in college football, the craziness happening. That and more here on TexAgs Rewind, the number one moment from last season. I think this would be unanimous. Maybe I'm wrong. If you polled 100 Aggie fans, TexAggers, I think the number one moment from last year is A&M beating Alabama.
I think that'd be number one on my list.
It's for sure on mine. Part of it is because we were there. I don't think you had to be there for it to be the number one moment, but I think definitely being there, being caught in that euphoria, everybody going on the field, just how it felt, everything about that game, how they dominated most of the first half, how Alabama made their push, and then A&M finishing the deal with Zach injured and the pass to Anias for the score, the field. But let's remember where we were, OB, leading up to that game. You beat Colorado with an injured quarterback, right? Barely. And you're like, whew, we survived a week of practice next week against New Mexico. Zach Calzada is going to be ready for Arkansas. New Mexico comes, it was whatever, right? They took care of business. Then Arkansas happens, and the first half is atrocious. They play catch-up, not good enough. Isaiah Spiller with a huge touchdown run to make it a one-score game. Defense hits KJ Jefferson a lot, knocks him out for a little bit. They have their chance. But they lose that game. Then they lose to Mississippi State. A game that just
you found a way to lose.
You found a way to lose. And in fact, not only did you find a way to lose, you were a step behind defensively in that game, and that's supposed to be the calling card of this team.
Well, where they really lost it, I know you want to talk about the next game, but They really lost it. If my memory serves, they scored 4 times in the red zone. 3 of them were field goals.
Yep. And that's going to get to your column here in a moment.
That'll be one of them, yeah.
That's one of the things in the column. So then you go to the Alabama game, and everyone's like, A&M may not even be bowl eligible. They've lost 2 straight. They've got the toughest part of their schedule ahead, and Alabama, number one team in the country, come into Kyle Field. It's going to be a bloodbath. And instead we got a pretty poised Zach Calzada, an offensive line that protected him with some early morning changes to that lineup. And you got a team that went after and feasted on Bryce Young, who had a very nice game, like statistically, but he was under duress all game long.
He was. I think he was sacked 4 times. There's one time he doesn't like to run. He can. One time he got a first down because he had to run for it, and he was looking to get down on the ground as soon as possible. He was harried, and I think it showed on their last series.
Yeah.
And Elko had a great scheme that night, and the players really pulled it off.
Let's talk about that A&M game last year. That's the game, when you talk to Aggie fans, that really stings more than any of them. Yes, they went 8-4. Yes, they beat Alabama. But that Mississippi State game is the one that hurts probably the most when you look at it. Tell me how big that game was last season for this team that seemed to find themselves.
It was absolutely a turning point. I thought that the team clicked on both sides of the ball in a way that we had not seen all season long. And I asked the players after that, some of them, if they felt like that was the turning point of the season, and they said yes. So I feel like that's whenever this team really seemed to hit its stride. After the majority of that front end of the season, we saw a lot of inconsistency on both sides of the ball, but I feel like they really started to find themselves across multiple position groups. And I think that it kind of just changed things. And I think that moving forward into the season, we're going to see a team that just continues to build off the momentum that really started at that point.
A&M is going to Starkville this year. What makes it such a difficult place to play?
I think it's a better environment than people give it credit for. I think that the fan base in general, they kind of start to quiet down a little bit whenever the team starts doing badly. But whenever this team gets momentum, I mean, I covered the LSU Tigers and it almost even rivals that atmosphere. So I think just the cowbells and the hostility whenever that place gets really fired up is hard to deal with. I've heard a lot of players. I talked to Devin Leary from NC State, and he said that the cowbells bothered him. So I think there's a lot of guys who come in on offense that have an issue with that.
Talking to Crissy Froyd here on TexAgs Radio. All right, so why do you think the SEC media slept on Mississippi State? I know you had another column on that. Well, why do you think that's the case, and what is the realistic expectations?
Well, they do every year. And quite frankly, I mean, just to be blunt, I think it's because a lot of the media does not pay attention to Mississippi State and they don't watch Mississippi State. And so therefore, they don't know about the underrated talent that Mississippi State has. They don't know about how going into year 3 of the Mike Leach era is like the fastest that the air raid's ever progressed. They haven't studied the fact that everywhere that the air raid has been, even at the most lowly schools, I mean, you go back all the way to Iowa Wesleyan, has simply elevated it in a way that has been unprecedented. And so I think the realistic expectations for this season, I have this being a 9-win team because they should have been a 9-win team last year, despite that schedule. So I think it's going to be a big year really for them to rise to the occasion and to show that they are capable of this and really to finally make a statement, because all the media is saying right now that Mississippi State has the toughest schedule in the nation. They're not going to be able to do it, not going to be able to hang maybe 6 or 7 wins. And so I think that this is exactly what they want going into this year.
Crissy, what worked so well for Mississippi State last year in the games that they won? What worked and what is something that they can build on?
Well, I think it was playing fast and playing consistent. It's something that we heard Mike Leach talk about a lot, and it sounds really boring. But I mean, you go back to all the games that Mississippi State lost or that they barely won, and you'll notice that it's like they start super slow, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, there's a sense of urgency now. We're in a football game, we have to go win it. And so then they finally kind of turn the page and then make this comeback. I think Mississippi State beat its own comeback record in program history twice last season, and that was a problem. And so I think that if this team can start fast and play consistent games throughout next season, they'll be just fine.
People forget too how down to the wire some of these things go. Anthony Lucas, I was listening to his conversation there with Luch yesterday. Like the night before, he wasn't sure. Like, you know, sometimes these things just are not going to happen, 6 months before we want them to happen.
Well, and I've been on the wrong end of some predictions over the last few months. There were some guys that I think some A&M fans thought were going to go their way, and me, as an analyst, there were some guys I thought were going to go A&M's way. But what happened didn't really shake up the board too much. There's, like I said, so and things have a way of changing over time. It's like I said, it's recruiting. It's not over until the ink is dry, even in this new NIL era.
I don't want to talk about another school too much, but I want to ask you this about Texas. The fact that they've gotten the class that they have this early, in comparison to other schools that have done well this early in the process, is the retention typically good when we're talking July with a bigger class, or does it kind of change?
It depends, but I think what they're building on is they're selling Arch in the future as much as they are what they're going to bring to the table presently, and I think that helps solidify that group. They do have a strong core as far as Jonte Cook's kind of taken on a mouthpiece role in that class, and I think that's something that that can help rally that group, and it's a good solid class with some quality pieces, and I think it's set up to where they may lose a couple here and there, but I bet that group sticks together pretty solidly, unless the wheels just completely fall off in Austin.
Help us understand what's going on with David Hicks. I know that some people are concerned that he's not expected to show up this weekend, but you tell us the whole story when it comes to DJ.
Well, he's been a guy that's A&M has made a top priority for a long time. He has an incredible relationship with Coach Robinson, who's been recruiting him since his freshman year. They've been to A&M several times, and including a couple times, I want to say, in this summer, even. And I think he's going to go up to Oklahoma for. I think they're having an event on that Saturday, and I think that's got some people worried a little bit. But Hicks has always had an affinity for Texas A&M, and A&M continues to be a big player there. And I would, if I'm predicting right now, I think A&M is the leader. But he's a 5-star player. He's the number 1 prospect in the state. And you're going to have some competition with that.
What's his timeline?
He's not planning to announce anything until the Under Armour All-American game, I think. So it's going to be a long time. It's going to play out over the course of the fall. And, we'll see how it goes. But I feel pretty confident about where A&M sits right now with David and his family.
Jim, let's just, for instance, say that they do add Notre Dame next year. Does that, in a way, force the SEC's hand to act sooner than they want?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be very clear then that we're going to 16-team super conferences. And I think the SEC is kind of waiting. I think Clemson seems like the most obvious addition at this point, and then maybe Florida State. And the big holdup with that is the grant of rights that they've given to the ACC. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I know that there's talk of, hey, if you pay enough money, you can get out of that. And if the SEC is willing to guarantee enough money, then kind of we're in that nuclear arms race at that point, then I think you could see that happen. So I think, we're waiting on Notre Dame, and then I would expect Clemson, Florida State. I know Miami's in the mix. I don't think that's as lucrative as a Clemson or a Florida State. But that would seem like the obvious next steps.
Jim, a year ago, and several times over the last decade, it felt like the Big 12 was done, right? Yet here they are, potentially able to step up to be the 3rd conference, the 4th conference in that mix. Have you heard any traction going on with Big 12 and potentially adding the Arizona schools, maybe the Pac-12 left schools? Like, how are you seeing that kind of play out?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the rumors about the Big 12 raiding the Pac-12 after the reports that the Big Pac-12 didn't want to merge with the Big 12. So I wouldn't be surprised if they add a couple teams here. Now, I know Stuart Mandel of The Athletic just wrote a column about how much more lucrative the Pac-12 schools are than people realize without USC and UCLA, that the ratings were actually much higher than the Big 12 schools without Texas and Oklahoma. So, I really don't know what'll happen at this point. I remember, USC and UCLA, no one knew that was going to happen. Then there was a tweet from John Wilner, who was a Pac-12 insider. And then later that day, it was official from USC and UCLA. So I've really given up on trying to guess what'll happen next, but nothing would surprise me at this point.
All right, when you think about the school that we cover here, Texas A&M, and there's a lot of promise there. People, I think, used last season as a well, that's just what A&M does. They just eventually end up 8-4, 9-3, not really peeling back the curtain that, yeah, they had a backup quarterback and other major issues. Their starting center was out. One of their starting wide receivers out. A lot of things we can go into. But when you look at them this year, do you see them with a chance to hit it big?
I mean, certainly in terms of the talent, I think that they're right there. I think the big 3 everyone talks about is Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. And then Texas A&M is right in that next group of teams that can make the college football playoff. I certainly think they'll be favored in every game except for at Alabama. And it really comes down to, 1, the quarterback play. Who is it going to be, Max Johnson or Haynes King? And will they live up to all the hype and potential they have? And 2, how will the defense do and all the young, talented player on the defensive side of the ball? I think most people have kind of circled 2023 as the year that Texas A&M should compete for a national title. But I certainly think there's no reason they can't get into the college football playoff. The big thing will be, if they don't win at Alabama, then can the SEC get 3 teams in? Because you would expect Alabama and or Georgia to get in. And then can Texas A&M be a 3rd team from the SEC? We'll have to see how good the other teams from other conferences.
All right, we are done here for TexAgs Rewind. So if you're still watching this, tell me I'm still watching, David, even at this second. And right the exact second that you're watching this. Like, comment, and subscribe. Say hi to your friends for me. Say David says hi from TexAgs Rewind. He also says subscribe. Thank you.